All right, we want to go back to, I guess what I'd like to call the beginning. And one of the things that we see happening all across Europe after the defeat of Napoleon, so, we're saying, oh, we're talking about Hitler and the Holocaust. Why would we mention Napoleon? Why would we mention anything earlier than the 20th century? That's a good question. Do I have an answer? No, I don't really. No, I do. Some people call the 20th century, some people call the long 20th century. I don't usually use that kind of terminology, but some European historians speak of the long century of the 20th century, and it usually started in 1870 or so, 1865, 1870, and then take it up at least to like 1990, till the fall of the Soviet Union, let's say, okay, or beyond. One of the things that's happening all across Europe in the 19th century, early 19th century, and we're not going to talk about Napoleon, other than to say that, Napoleon took over a whole bunch of Europe, most of it, and that reshuffled everything and made a lot of people nervous. And of course, cost a lot of people their lives. When Napoleon was defeated, then those who remained, those who were victorious, decided that they wanted stability in Europe. Stability. They didn't want this revolution like the French Revolution, age of Napoleon. A lot of people died and so forth. And so they were able to bring about what we might call a conservative movement. And by the way, when you use words like conservative and liberal, they're loaded terms and they can mean different things to different people at different times. In this sense, I mean conservative in the fact that if you don't want a lot of change quickly, you could be called a conservative. If you want a lot of change quickly, then you would be called a liberal. Okay? So it's not that conservatives don't want change. They do. They just want it to be slower change, more measured change. Usually because they're a little happier with the way things are right now than the people who want to change everything quickly. People want to change everything quickly aren't happy with the way things are now. They don't want to wait around for things to change. So they wanted stability. So one of the things that comes out of this is nationalism. And I think this is also important for us to keep in mind because at the roots of a lot of things that are happening in the 20th century can be traced back to the growth of nationalism in the 19th century. So this might lead the question, what is nationalism? What do you think nationalism is? We use it a lot today. Certain presidents are identified with nationalism, and now it seems in the United States that if you support the United States, that you're somehow wrong. I heard a guy who said that he had a U.S. flag on his suit, and somebody came up and started giving him a hard time. He said, you support Trump, and you're like a neo-Nazi or something, and because he had an American flag. That seems strange to me, but in this climate, I can believe it. What is nationalism? Yeah.
Pride in your nation.
Pride in your nation, yeah. Yeah. And I think that's been taken, been declining. I saw some survey that said, fewer people today feel as though that they believe the United States is a good place to live, a good place or whatever. It's like dropped from 75% to 60% or something. Okay? Anyway, I don't know if those things can be counted. But nationalism, yes, it does. It's talking about your nation. Now, here in the United States, we often sort of conflate nation and country. In Europe, they're a little less clear about that. But yes, nation. And nationalism is usually tied up with symbols as well. So for example, the flag that I mentioned is a symbol of the nation. Okay? So saying the pledge, displaying the flag, that kind of stuff. Symbols, right? Symbols. All right, there are other symbols as well, but we'll move on. So I'm not going to spend much time on it. I think I'll go on by this because, well, maybe I shouldn't. The guy who leads this conservative movement is named Metternich. He's an Austrian diplomat. That's all I'll say about him. This is all happening in the Congress of Vienna, which is in the early 19th century, 1814, 1815. And the thing about this is it really keeps the general peace in Europe until World War I. I'm not saying there weren't any wars or conflicts. There were, but there was nothing like, sort of Napoleon's all-out European-wide wars, long-term battles. What were the principles that they were trying to work upon? Legitimacy. They wanted to restore the legitimate rulers back to what they were before Napoleon. Restitution. The French would make payment, and the French would give up the lands that they took over. And the third thing, stability. Trying to make sure the revolution or a revolution doesn't happen again, especially the French kind of revolution where they kill a lot of people, right? This will lead then to alliances. What's called the Quadruple Alliance. Quadruple because of four, obviously. 4 countries: England, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. Now, you may not know about Prussia, but in this course you need to know about Prussia. Prussia is in northern Germany, what would be northern Germany today. Prussia is really, I'll just, spoiler alert, they're the ones who are going to unify Germany under Prussian control, all right? And of course, Prussia and Austria both speak German, although the Austrians had a large empire that was mixed with a lot of different people, a lot of different languages, and that sort of thing. So this alliance then brings stability. Basically, these 4 countries got together and say, hey, we're in this together. We're not going to attack each other. If somebody attacks us, then we will join together on that. And that brought a lot of stability for a long time. But also what we see is a move to more power to the governments, centralized power, and of course we've been seeing that ever since. Today the centralized, I think, and again that's not my field, but if the founding fathers, as they're sometimes called, would probably, if you'd ask them what would be the thing to be most shocked about today, it would be the centralized power of Washington, D.C. I mean, there's so much power in the presidency, so much power in Washington. The federal government has so much power today that I think that would surprise them. And I don't think they would think that's a good idea, but you may have your own opinions about that. But that seems to be growing and growing and growing. And of course, once it grows, once somebody has power, they don't want to give it up. They only want more. Well, check it out. It's a thing called history. See what happens. Laissez-faire economics. Okay, I'm not going to talk much about that. That's basically free enterprise. Leave your hands off, laissez-faire, leave your hands off of the economy. Let the economy, the idea here is that there are natural laws that govern the economy. And if you mess things up, you're going to mess up those laws. It's just like if you try to mess up with gravity, right? Gravity's got laws, and there's laws of motion. You try to mess that up. So this was generally an idea that a lot of people had about a lot of things, about government, about economy, and so forth, that there were natural laws or rules by which things, there would be a natural correction to things. All right. So because of that, you wouldn't bail out companies that failed. You'd let them fail. Because if they're failing, well, then they're doing something wrong. And if they fail, another company will start that will be more efficient, be better. Well, there you go. Now, here's the way Europe looks in 1815. The thing we're not showing you here is that all of that stuff in the middle there, all of this from France all the way over to the dotted line here, all of that the French controlled. They either controlled directly or indirectly from Spain all the way over to Russia, from Italy all the way up to Denmark. Okay, this is all the French Empire. After the Congress of Vienna, the Treaty of Vienna, all these get divided into small countries now. Try to divide it up ethnically, try to bring things back that way. And so this, in one sense, is retribution against the French. In another sense, it will create a kind of problem, especially in Central Europe, that you have lots of very small countries that are fledgling countries. And this is going to lead then to the idea for all this time, Germany has been divided into very tiny principalities. In fact, if you go to the time of Martin Luther, you may have heard of that guy, Martin Luther, during his time there were over 300 principalities in Germany. Principalities and states. Who liked that? The French liked that a lot. The British liked that a lot. The Russians liked that a lot. Nobody wanted Germany to be unified. It was much better if they were divided. It made them weak. Italy is also divided. I've got it amped up here. And some of the things that are happening at this time, that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is sort of a forerunner of what's going to happen to Germany. In Italy, there are lots of small states, not as many as Germany, but eventually Italy is united in one country we might think of as Italy. And in many ways, Germany follows the same pattern. Also, you need to remember the Ottoman Empire is collapsing. And it had controlled the Middle East, big chunks of Europe, North Africa, and so forth. And as it collapsed, everybody wants to come in and take over territory, the British, the French, and others. And so they're hungry, the Russians, they're all hungry for this territory. So a guy named King Victor Emmanuel II, who is the king of the Piedmont, will eventually become the king of Italy through a unification of Italy. But now let's get to what is our main subject then of the day, and that is the unification of Germany. Germany was divided into scores of small principalities. The main one, the most powerful one, was Prussia. And it was large, it was in the north, it was wealthy, it was very militarized, very regimented. The Prussians were the kind of guys who would, get up at 4 a.m. and do their road work, eat a raw egg, lift some weights, go to work, get the job done, come home, have other stuff they got to do. In other words, they have a schedule. They'd have like every hour of their day planned, disciplined, regimented. That's what you want to think of when you think of the Prussians, all right? Maybe that's oversimplification, but it's a good way to think of them. And they have a very strong military, and they're very military and organizationally minded. Not all the people of Germany were. Okay? And so it's going to be then these people who will unify, that is the Prussians, who will eventually unify Germany under them. Other people had tried to unify Germany. They tried to do it through the sort of Prussian assembly, that we should come up with a plan to try to unify the German-speaking people. Well, it didn't work so well. But most people believe that the German-speaking people would eventually be unified under one of two powers. It is either going to be Austria, who also spoke German, or it was going to be Prussia. Now, another thing to remember is that Austria was Roman Catholic, and the southern part of Germany, Bavaria and so forth, Roman Catholic. And so the Austrians were Roman Catholics, they spoke German, and so this is also a possibility. However, it's going to be this guy, Kaiser Wilhelm I, or sometimes called William I. In German, it would be Wilhelm I, right? But sometimes his name is anglicized to William. Kaiser Wilhelm was a guy who wanted to grow his army. You can see he's wearing a uniform there. He's a military kind of guy. He wants a strong army. He's got goals and desires to expand Prussian territory, to unite German-speaking people. So here is our guy. And, I might add, the finest set of sideburns in this course. I always offer people extra credit if by the end of the semester you can have facial hair as impressive in imitation of our Kaiser Wilhelm I. But you better get started on it because we got to measure it. If it doesn't measure up, no extra credit. But there you have a challenge. Impressive facial hair, I think. Now enter our other guy who's also in his own right got impressive facial hair. Not as impressive as, I mean, the other guy's the king, right? So you don't want to outdo him. But he's got a great mustache. And this is Otto von Bismarck. This is a guy you need to remember, and you know, when you do the assignment 1, or if you've done the assignment 1, you will hear about Otto von Bismarck, right? And when you do the assignment 2, you're going to hear about Kaiser Wilhelm II. Not 1. Well, Otto von Bismarck was called in by the king when the legislation couldn't get it done. And basically they said, when the legislation couldn't get it done, we need Germany unified. That's what Wilhelm said. And Bismarck said, yeah, no problem. We can do that. I can do that if you give me the power. I will unify Germany with iron and with blood. He meant business. He was appointed prime minister. And so immediately he makes some deals. It's interesting about him. And you might think, oh, he's just a guy that likes war. Well, he definitely uses war. But he's a guy that'll make deals too. He'll make deals, and then he'll make wars, and he'll make more deals, and he'll make more war, and then finally he'll make more deals. But in the end, Germany will be unified. Well, true. He does it. He makes a deal with Austria, Russia, and France. And he's going to use war and diplomacy in order to achieve his goal. Maybe we can learn something from him. One thing I think we could learn from some guy like Bismarck, he knew what his goal was. He actually had a goal. I meet several people, I don't know if they actually have a goal, or if they have one, if they can identify it. Other than they just, want to eat lunch or something. Which, is not a bad goal, but, or come Friday night and have pizza, that's a good goal. But I mean, I'm talking about an overarching goal, maybe for your life, a purpose. Bismarck had one. You may not agree with his goal, nor the way that he achieved it. However, he had one. If you don't, it's kind of like if you don't have a target, you just start shooting, right? You're never going to know. You're probably not going to hit your target. And in the end, you won't even know. I shot off all my bullets, and now I'm dead, right? So do I do what I accomplished? Well, I don't know. A few of my bullets randomly hit something important, but maybe that's not the best analogy. Well, we're talking about war. So you need to have a goal, and he certainly did, and he had purpose and he had determination. These are all things that I think are not bad things to have. Now, not only will he use diplomacy, but he's going to use 3 wars. A war with Denmark, a war with Austria, a war with France. You say, now wait a minute, he just made a deal with Austria, France, and Russia. Yes, he did. Wars, by the way, you may not believe this, but it's true, wars unify people. Now, here's the deal. If you want to have a war that unifies people, you've got to give the people the rationale for the war. In other words, why is this war happening? Why is this war important? Second thing you got to do is you got to win the war. And the third thing is you got to do all that in a rather short period of time. A war that goes on for year after year after year, not going to unify. It will divide people. Okay? So, if you want to unify people, yes, a well-crafted reason for a war that you can win quickly will definitely unify people. Believe it or not, it will. And that's what he does. The first war is with Denmark. This happens in 1863. What is the purpose for this war? Denmark, those oppressive people, have two territories called Holstein and Schleswig. You've probably heard of Holstein because of the cows. They make great milk cows, Holsteins. That's where they come from originally, from this area. It's on that little, Denmark's a peninsula that sticks way up off of Europe. I don't know if you've looked at the map. But on that peninsula going up, there are two territories, there are two regions that speak German, not Danish. And Danish is something else besides just what you have with coffee. So he wants Holstein and Schleswig basically to liberate them from the oppressive Danes, these German-speaking people. Now, by using this, the Austrians have to join in. Why? Because they speak German. They don't want it to appear they don't care about German-speaking people on this peninsula. So actually, the Austrians come in and help Bismarck to fight the Danes. And of course, the Danes at this point are not very powerful militarily. Pretty easy, pretty quick win. It's got all the things you need to unify people. You got a specific goal. You've got a pretty much assured victory in a short amount of time. That's War I. How about War II? Could be a little bit harder sell. This one's called the 7 Weeks War. Give you an idea how long it lasted. By the way, you can't always go by that to how long something lasted. The 100 Years' War lasted longer than 100 years, just in case you're ever on Jeopardy. I have had students on Jeopardy. I had a student on Jeopardy. I did. A former student was on Jeopardy. He actually got ancient history as one of his topics. He did not do well. I was not happy. I said, he went on a trip with me overseas to the Middle East, and I showed him things, and then they're asking him questions, and he wasn't getting it right. I said, I know you know this. It's the pressure. It's always the pressure. It's that Alex Trebek. I blame him. He looks at people. When he's off camera, he stares at them in a very mean way. Go ahead, Fred. And then he gives those little snide remarks when they don't get it right. Makes people nervous. Well, anyway, this is sometimes called the Austro-Prussian War of 1865. While we had something else going on over here in America at that time. Over in Austria, over in Germany, they were fighting. The Austrians and the Prussians were fighting. Some were reluctant because, don't the Austrians speak German? Yes. But they were seen as a threat, and he was able to do that. They went in, they crushed the Austrian army, they took over the capital of Vienna, and then what did they do? Did they occupy it? No, they turned it all back over to the Austrians. They wanted to show that they could defeat the Austrians, that they were more powerful than the Austrians, but they didn't occupy it. Same with Denmark. They liberated those two territories. They didn't go and take over the rest of Denmark. So the goal here is just to show, if you're going to pick a German-speaking country to be the leader of the people, you should pick the strongest one. We're the strongest one. We're the Prussians. I like these little guys up in the corner. I think they're little lead figures that somebody painted in the garb of the Austrian-Prussian War. Well, how about the Franco-Prussian War? This was an easy sell because it's against the French. Nobody likes the French, except for the French. They really like themselves. Now, I was digging this summer with a French guy, right? Taylor was made friends, pseudo-friends. Wasn't he your roommate? Yeah, he had a roommate. It was French. So I told him one time, this guy, that Taylor was not a French fan, but he said he already knew that. Taylor had made that clear. What? Yeah, you did. I know. Yeah, cheese, fromage. Yeah, that's not French. So, what can we say? Well, anyway, what was his name again? Valentine? Valenton. Yeah, no, I can't say that. Yeah, Polish. He's a Polish French guy. Well, anyway, that's probably why he likes Italian cheese. Well, anyway, the French. It was easy to sell this one. Now, the French were afraid because now Germany, or Prussians, have led the German people. They've taken over territory from Denmark. They defeated the Austrians. And now the French think we're the next ones, perhaps. Another thing that made them nervous is that Wilhelm, or William's cousin, was offered the throne of Spain. This goes back to the Habsburg Empire that we don't have time to talk about in here, but the Habsburgs controlled Spain as well as Germany at one time, and so his cousin was offered this. It ends up his cousin didn't do it, but this made the French nervous that they were going to be surrounded by Wilhelm and his cousin, on the south and on the east. And so basically, the French wanted a guarantee that this would never happen. And so William I, writes a message to them. He sends it by a telegram. Telegram, of course, was the fastest communication at that time. You would write something, it would be transcribed into dots and dashes, into short and long. There you go. And but what happened was a guy by the name of Bismarck intercepted it on its way to the telegraph office, and he rewrote it. He edited it to make it sound more ominous. What William wrote was roughly, well, I can't promise what my relatives might do in the future, and so this is really not my concern because I can't control what my relatives do. I can't make you that promise. What Bismarck made it sound like was, don't get all up in my grill, or you're going to be in trouble, which is usually what I say to people. I like to use the word grill a lot, usually with hamburgers and stuff like that, but sometimes about I'm thinking about getting a thing you put in here, gold, with diamonds in it. What's that? Yeah, that's what I don't have one of those, but I'd like to get one of those. That's a goal. Have some grill work. Anyway, it made it sound like he was saying, you're not going to tell me what to do, and if you do, you're in trouble. And so that's what he sends. And so this provokes then, actually the French declare war on Prussia. He doesn't have to sell the war. The French declare war on the Prussians because they get this telegram and they say, well, we're going to strike them first before they're ready. And that was an easy victory for the Prussians. And so in the end, Germany is unified now after 3 quick victories. By the way, once they defeat the French, they give them back all the land except for 2 little provinces on the border you may have heard of, Alsace and Lorraine. These were borderlands that were disputed for many years. They're very fertile land. They're good farmland, good for grapes and wheat and all that kind of stuff. And basically, this territory had been sort of competed for back and forth. This wasn't the first time. So the Germans took those 2 territories. And they gave them everything else. They marched all the way into Paris, but then they just said, that's it. They made the French sign an agreement with them in a train car. And one of the videos that you'll watch, you'll see the train car, because the guy takes you to the train car and he shows you, because at the end of World War I, the French make the Germans come to the same train car. Symbolism? Yeah, you bet. Right? In your face is what they're saying. So then after that, he's going to use a balance of power. He'll establish that through treaties. So here is a map where I will now, I've labored over this all weekend to bring you this highly detailed graphic in order to instruct you. You're welcome. Here we go. The first area, remember, was up there in that peninsula of Denmark. Do you see it up here? Do you see the names? Schleswig and Holstein. For those of you in the back, that's what that says. So that's the first war. The second one, or well, is actually the third one, Alsace and Lorraine. That's right over here. So you see, it's not a lot of territory. They don't have a lot of territorial gain. Their major territorial gain was they unified all the rest of the German-speaking people. And when it came to Austria, they didn't take any of that territory. They came in, defeated them, and then left it. So all this sort of, what, purple, mauve, I don't know what color it is, this sort of purplish color, tan, purple, is now Germany. So it includes West Prussia, East Prussia, then all these other small territories, including Schleswig, Holstein, and so forth. Okay? And then Alsace and Lorraine annexed. So now Germany is united. All right, how much time do we have left? 4 minutes. Do we have any questions? Yes, Taylor.
So was it something where Prussia looked over the rest of the German Federation, or was it then considered all one thing?
Well, King Wilhelm will now be called Kaiser Wilhelm. So they actually rule it. By the way, Kaiser comes from the same word as Caesar. So it's an emperor. Like Tsar in Russia also comes from the word for Caesar. Tsar, Kaiser. So he's an emperor. There were still local, they still had nobility that ran local areas. But this, make no mistake, they are going to more and more centralize the government under them. So the real powerhouse of Germany then is going to be Prussia, or the former Prussian territories in the north. This has the most money. It has the access to the sea. It will have the most shipping. Eventually, at this time, it's also the most industrialized of any of these other areas. You get down in the southern part of Germany down here, say in Bavaria. It's in the mountains. It's very agricultural. Not very wealthy. Okay, well, most of the wealth and industrialization is going on up here by the Baltic Sea, and that's under Prussia. And so Bismarck then will have this situation where Germany is united. He stops talking about war. No more wars after this, as far as he's concerned. He makes a treaty with Russia. Russia was the one that was concerned that they might move that way. You can see why they might think that. Russia's territory is not very far away. It's over in what we might call Poland today, because Poland had been gobbled up in the 19th century by different powers, including Austria, Prussia, and Russia. And so he made a deal with the Russians, and basically Germany was at peace. But what he is trying to do then is he's trying to now use the power of the Prussian government, now the German government, to unify all those territories under Prussia. So they got plenty to do. Kind of like the United States. We never took over a lot of territory, unless you don't count all the stuff from sea to shining sea. We took over a lot of territory on this continent that we then had to incorporate, so that kept us pretty busy in the 19th century, right? In the 18th. especially the 19th century. And therefore, we weren't like the British or something going all over the world taking places. Okay? I mean, we ended up with the Philippines, but that was kind of by accident because of the Spanish-American War, because basically they were down messing around in Cuba. And so, that kind of thing. So here with Germany, the same thing. They wanted to concentrate on that. Now, what's going to happen when we get, if we a little preview, when we get to Kaiser Wilhelm II, after the first one dies, Kaiser Wilhelm II is going to come in, he's going to start rocking the boat, he's going to say, hey, we need to expand. Everyone else in Europe, like especially the British was his model, the British had this huge empire. We don't have any territory outside of Germany. We need territory. We need an empire. And so that is where we start to see laying the foundation for something called World War I. All right, we'll leave it there for today.